All right, I hope I've got enough time to make this video before the rain gets too heavy. We've got Hurricane Helene is moving into the southeast. It's about to strike Florida. It'll be a tropical storm by the time it gets to us, but we're getting some of the rain right now. Anyway, I've really been wanting to finish this video for a little while now. I want to talk about pawpaw trees and some of these behind me here. And you know, pawpaws have a lot of hype. A lot of people have heard of them now. They're really getting a lot of attention in the media, in the foraging groups, agroforestry, native plant people. They're really gaining a lot of traction. There's 3 of them here. These tall, skinny boys or girls or both. And the rain is really, I don't know. It feels like it's about to start coming down. I've got a little bit of tree cover here. I'm down by the river. Let's see, I'll try to give you guys a view of that. We're passing by some little pawpaws to get to the river. Okay, and so I'm gonna just try to touch briefly on some general characteristics of the pawpaw, how they grow, kind of how they exist in the wild. I want to get down here to a thicker grove of them. There's a few pawpaws interspersed in amongst a bunch of other trees here along the river edge. But as I go further down, there's a big pure stand. I had to avoid a spider web there. Big pure stand of them, which happens very frequently with pawpaw. Like you can see here, pretty much every tree in this group is a pawpaw tree. Most of them probably clones. They have a very aggressive root suckering tendency, and so you'll see this a lot where there's these big clonal patches of pawpaw. All of these little sticks, they're all pawpaw seedlings. They're starting to get their yellow fall color. They have a really vibrant yellow. I think it looks really pretty. It's about to come on, that golden fall pawpaw color. You need 2 of them. You know, the main attraction is the fruit, right? That's why most people are into pawpaw, is the fruit that they make. You can see a dead tree came down here somewhat recently. This wasn't down the last time I was in here a few weeks ago. But you need 2 genetically different pawpaw trees in order to get pollinations. You know, it's better to have more than 2, really. But you need typically at least 2 to get fruit. This patch must have a couple of different seedlings that spread out clonally, because there is a lot of fruit in this patch I came through. This is a wild stand. There's a lot of diversity in the pawpaw. You know, just from tree to tree, it's like apples. There's a lot of diversity from a Honeycrisp versus a Fuji versus a Granny Smith. Very different flavors. You know, the trees grow different. There's dwarf apples, right? Dwarfing root stocks. There's full-size apples. Pawpaw also have a lot of differences between the varieties, and so these fruits in this patch are rather small. Nothing to write home about. They're still good. If you haven't tried pawpaw and you want to try them, or if you've tried it before and didn't love it, I would recommend, if you can, get your access on some cultivar quality fruit. Named varieties are night and day different from, you know, just the average wild pawpaw. Okay, the season kind of varies. There's actually a few fruit still up in this tree. Let me see if I can show you guys a cluster of fruit. There's a little cluster I can see right here, right there. Those look pretty moldy and discolored. There might be something wrong with those, although they do tend to look pretty rotten by the time they're ripe. Go into the grove a little bit to continue talking about the pawpaw. I'm under the pawpaw canopy now, out of the rain a little bit, as you can see. If you're trying to harvest pawpaw trees, like I said, they have to be fully ripe to be enjoyed. Okay, so you do not want to eat an unripe pawpaw. They also don't last very long. They don't have a long shelf life. You've probably heard this before. That's why you don't see them on the grocery store shelves. They'll fall off the tree when they're ripe. You can give the tree a gentle shake like so to try to get the fruit that are ripe to fall if they haven't fallen yet. You know, I heard this when I just started foraging for pawpaw, and I would go out and I would vigorously, you know, really shake the tree violently like that. I don't recommend doing that. You can actually get some fruit that are unripe, that are still really like rock hard, will fall if you shake them too violently. So I think just a gentle shaking is what you want to do. You do not want to eat the skin or the seeds. The skin and the seeds are both toxic. You can see a little pawpaw right here, still not ripe. So this is actually a good point to talk about. This is about the smallest they'll be. The largest they'll be is the size of a large, you know, potato or sweet potato. They can get truly massive, some of the cultivated varieties. Just a few more quick things that I wanted to say about the pawpaw trees before we get into how to prepare the seeds and how I plant them. They are shade tolerant. They will grow and survive for a very long time in the shade and be very happy, but they will not produce very many fruit unless they have full sun. Basically, the less sun, the less fruit. Sometimes you will get a handful of fruit in the shade, but like I said, you'll get the most fruit if you give them full sun. Now, when they're very young trees, they do benefit, like the first year of their life, they do benefit greatly from some shade. Once they're over a year old, they can handle the sun. They actually prefer it. They like consistent access to soil moisture throughout the growing season, so you'll typically find them in the wetter, low-lying areas. Somehow I made it 6 minutes into this video without talking about how the fruits actually taste. So, like I said, they have a lot of diversity similar to apples. Some of the fruits are going to have more of a banana, mango, sort of pineapple flavor going on. It can be kind of stronger in any of those three directions. It can also have a really caramely taste and other flavors too. There's just a lot of diversity in the fruits. You'll really experience this if you go to like a Paw Paw festival or a place where there's dozens of different named cultivars that you can try. One thing that's kind of cool is even though they have all the diversity, which I keep comparing to apples, unlike apples, Paw Paw are relatively true from seed. If you get seed from some good high quality cultivar parent trees, you will very likely get seedlings that have similar traits, that have large fruit, that are very tasty, few seeds. Those sorts of things tend to pass on to the offspring pretty regularly. Anyway, I assume a lot of you are probably interested in growing these trees yourself, so this is how I like to do that. So this method that I'm about to talk about is how I prefer to handle Paw Paw seed processing. I'll be frank with you guys. I don't eat very many Paw Paw. I have tried some in the past. The taste is amazing. I love the taste. I love the smell. They're a super cool fruit, super cool tree. In the past, I've had some stomach issues around Paw Paw. This can happen to some people. Usually it happens if you eat too, like the fruit, the pulp that's, if you're scraping the skin too much, getting too close to the skin. But some people just seem to have sensitivities to Paw Paw. I don't want to scare anybody, but I just find it doesn't sit well in my stomach, so I don't eat the fruit very often at all. That has impact on how I prepare the seed. If I was interested in eating the fruit, I would just eat the fruit and spit out the seeds. I would, you can pulp the fruit. I guess I'm not sure what the best way to pulp the fruit is. Maybe a food mill or some sort, maybe just by hand squeezing out the pulp and sorting out the seeds. Someone's probably got that figured out. You can, search around on the YouTube for pulping pawpaws. I'm sure that's well established. I don't eat a lot of the fruit, so I can't really comment on that too much. But if you're using the fruit for consumption, human consumption, you have to separate the seeds and the skin anyway. So you have to have a method for that. Then you can just take the seeds, put them into storage, which I'll talk about in a minute. Since I'm not eating many of the fruit, what I'm doing is I'm trying to be as fast as possible, minimal labor as possible, to get the seeds out of this fruit. One thing I like to do as a nursery, I like to have access to cultivar quality trees, and so I reach out to farms and orchards where people are growing lots of cultivar quality pawpaw, and I ask if I can buy the end of season rotten fruit that they were not able to sell. That's a cheaper way for me to get access to the fruit than trying to pay for, food grade, human consumable quality pawpaws. I'm not going to eat it, so I just want the seed. I want the end of season rotten stuff. It won't affect the seed quality. So sometimes I get pre-rotted fruit, sometimes I get fresh fruit that I collected myself, like this one here. And all I do, it's a very fun process. I just do that. I throw all the fruits into a bucket. Sometimes I do this by hand. I just do that. It's very satisfying. It smells amazing, just like so. Or sometimes I'll get a big 2x4, mix them around, mush them up with a 2x4. You can put them in a big tub with your feet. But the basic gist is that I'm going to mash all the fruit up, and then I'm going to do what I did in this bucket over here. I'm going to mix in a ton of wood chips. Or you could, this doesn't have to be wood chips. This could be leaves. This could be sand, sawdust, compost, any sort of organic carbon material that can absorb nutrients and hold water. And you can see about, probably a week and a half ago, I mixed up a ton of pawpaw fruit into these wood chips. You can see the pawpaw fruit is breaking down. It's not harming the seeds at all. Here's a seed here. It's nice and moist still. It's just been sitting in this bucket. with wood chips, and they can sit in this bucket all winter long. Note that the bucket does have holes drilled in it. I've talked about this for storage for many types of tree seed. Holes in the side, holes in the bottom of the bucket. You got to make sure it stays moist. You know, if you're in a drought, you may want to water this. They do hold water pretty well. They don't evaporate a whole lot with the wood chips. For pawpaw seed, nothing really likes to eat the seed, so you don't have to really protect the lid. This has hazelnuts in it, so I have this protected. Again, I've talked about this in other videos. In the deep of winter, I will stack mulch, hay, whatever I have, leaves, wood chips around the sides to kind of insulate. This can get cold, this can freeze, but you don't want it to freeze super hard. You do want to insulate it a little bit. And then whenever you're ready to plant, you just dump that bucket out into a wheelbarrow, pick out all the seeds, plant the seeds by hand, or you just dump the whole bucket and spread it thin over a bed and call it good. As I've mentioned before in many other videos, you know, those of you who've been following along, this will not be news. I prefer to fall plant my pawpaws, really all of my tree seed if I can. This time of year in September when the pawpaws are coming in, I almost never have bed space open. You know, all of my beds are full of trees. They won't start to be pulled out of the beds till October, November. So I don't have bed space. If I did, I would be skipping the bucket step entirely, planting the seed right now. That definitely works in the Southeast. It definitely works in the Mid-Atlantic. As you get further north into the Northeast and it gets colder, that fall planting, I don't have direct experience doing it with a harsher winter. Some folks have reported success. Others have reported issues with fall sowing of seed like that, you know, the winter is just much colder and harsher up there. So if you don't know already, if I haven't made it clear already, pawpaw seed, you know, most of our native tree seed is really, they don't like to dry out. You'll get much better germination if you don't let them dry out. Obviously there is such a thing as too wet and seeds can mold, but they're not like garden seeds. Most of the tree seed don't like to dry out. There are some exceptions like redbud, locust, they do like to dry out. But on the whole, most of our tree species, the seed doesn't like to dry out. Pawpaw is especially susceptible to drying out. The seed really should never be dried out. It doesn't mean if the seeds get a little bit dry that they're totally duds and you should throw them away. I have had pawpaw seed that, you know, accidentally has dried out, and I've gotten them to grow. Now, the context specific to that was that I've had seed dry out for maybe a week at the most. I then took those seeds, soaked them in water overnight, and then got them into a very moist wood chip medium. And those seeds did germinate. I got a pretty good germination rate with those. But that, you know, they weren't dry for very long. So any longer than that, I'd start to get really concerned about the viability of the pawpaw seed. Just something worth mentioning. You've probably heard this other places if you're into pawpaw. I mean, people mention this a lot. It's pretty important, it seems, with pawpaw specifically. Like I said, other tree seed also like to not dry out, but there's more flexibility. Persimmon seed, I think in my experience, they like to not dry out, but I have dried persimmon seed out completely all winter and planted them in the spring and had them germinate. So, you know, there's always flexibility here. The last thing I'll add is that they do form a very deep taproot in their first year, and so be prepared to deal with that, whether you're planting in air pruning pots or deep pots or deep garden beds. My solution to this is to use air pruning beds, which I've talked about in other videos, and you've probably seen little clips of here throughout this video, but that's my preferred method to handle trees that have deep taproots, is the air pruning bed. And if you're curious to learn more, you can check out some of my videos or other people's videos and content about air pruning beds. But just know that the pawpaw do form a deep taproot, and you do not want to disturb that in the transplanting process.